Autumn 1938, the Soviet Union. Fear still rules the country, but now it hides behind routines and slogans. People march in parades and sing about progress and unity. Newspapers talk about enemies defeated and factories growing stronger. Schools teach children to honor Stalin and report anything suspicious. In the cities, long lines form outside shops, while in the countryside, families struggle under harsh Soviet rule. At night, the silence is heavy, and no one knows who will be arrested next. Some try to live normal lives, go to work and raise children. But even a whisper or a glance can lead to arrest. The innocent people and devoted communists are not safe either. Inside the secret police, new figures rise as old ones fall. Among them stands a man who will become the hangman of entire nations within the Soviet Union. His name is Lavrentiy Beria. Lavrentiy Pavlovich Beria was born on the 29th of March, 1899 in the village of Mirhul, in today's Abkhazia, then part of the Russian Empire. His father Pavel Beria was a landowner, and his mother Marta Jakeli came from old Georgian nobility that had once held noble status but no longer possessed political influence. Young Lavrentiy did well in school, first in the Georgian coastal city of Sukhumi, and then in the Baku Polytechnicum, where he studied engineering. While in Baku, the capital of today's Azerbaijan, he came into contact with revolutionary ideas. But ironically, he first worked for the anti-Bolshevik movement, and only later he joined the Communist Party. During the years of his studies, the Russian Empire was collapsing under the pressures of the First World War and revolutions. The abdications of Tsar Nicholas II in 1917, followed by the Bolshevik seizure of power during the October Revolution in the same year, plunged the country into a bloody civil war. As the old institutions crumbled, ambitious young men like Beria found opportunities to rise by proving their loyalty and usefulness to the new regime. Beria joined the Cheka, the Soviet secret police, and took part in suppressing anti-Bolshevik forces and other groups the communists considered enemies. He became known for his discipline and ruthlessness, signs that would define his entire career. In the early 1920s, Beria returned to Georgia, which had briefly tried to establish its independence as the Democratic Republic of Georgia. This republic survived only a few years, and when the Red Army invaded Georgia in 1921, Beria worked alongside Bolshevik leaders to secure control over the region. He was involved in suppressing resistance and dismantling institutions that supported Georgian nationalism and ideas of Georgian independence. Beria led the repression of a Georgian uprising in 1924, after which up to 10,000 people were executed. Over time, he rose through the ranks of the security apparatus in the Soviet Union. He had become head of the Georgian branch of the OGPU, the successor to the Cheka and predecessor of the NKVD. All of them were Soviet secret services, with the aim of suppressing any opposition against the communist regime, and were determined to also seek out the Bolsheviks' internal enemies and destroy them. Beria was highly ambitious and skilled at winning the favor of powerful patrons. In the early 1930s, he created a close relationship with Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, who himself was a Georgian. Beria also demonstrated his ability to deliver results in consolidating Moscow's control over the territory in the Caucasus. He suppressed dissent, oversaw purges of party members suspected of disloyalty, and managed collectivization campaigns that forced peasants into state-run farms. His methods were often brutal. Many people were arrested on fabricated charges or executed as examples to others. By the mid-1930s, Stalin was preparing to launch the Great Purge, a massive campaign to eliminate perceived enemies within the Communist Party, the military, and Soviet society. During this purge, Hundreds of thousands of Soviet citizens were murdered by the communist regime. Beria proved eager to assist. In 1938, he was summoned to Moscow and appointed deputy head of the NKVD under Nikolai Yezhov. At that time, Yezhov was responsible for orchestrating mass arrests, show trials, and executions that terrorized the entire country. Later that same year, Stalin decided Yezhov was no longer reliable. As thousands of NKVD officers were themselves being executed, Beria replaced Yezhov as head of the NKVD in November 1938. Once in power, Beria oversaw the arrest and execution of no one else than Yezhov himself, accusing him of treason and other crimes. Although the mass executions of the Great Purge slowed, repression continued under Beria's leadership, and the NKVD remained a central instrument of Stalin's rule of terror. Beria reorganized the security apparatus and worked to restore some stability after the chaos of the purges and the state-organized murder of its own citizens. He released some prisoners and brought new discipline to the NKVD's operations. However, he also oversaw further waves of terror, including the deportation of entire ethnic groups such as the Poles, Finns, and Baltic peoples, whom Stalin distrusted as potential enemies. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. In 1940, Beria directed the infamous NKVD operation that led to the Katyn massacre, in which more than 20,000 Polish officers and intellectuals were executed. During World War II, especially after the German attack against the Soviet Union in June 1941, Beria's power grew even more. He supervised the internal security of the Soviet Union and managed the vast Gulag system, which provided forced labor to build infrastructure and support wartime production. Millions of prisoners worked in mines, factories, and camps under inhumane conditions. Beria also controlled counterintelligence operations through SMERSH counterintelligence organization, which sought to root out spies and maintain discipline among Soviet troops. As the Second World War drew to its end, Beria directed once again the deportations of entire populations accused of collaborating with the Germans. In 1944, he supervised the forced removal of Chechens, Ingush, Crimean Tatars, and other ethnic groups from their homelands to Central Asia. Hundreds of thousands of people were loaded onto trains in the harsh winter conditions, and many died from hunger and cold during the journey. Beria reported to Stalin that the operations had been carried out successfully. At the same time, Beria was placed in charge of important strategic programs. In 1944, Stalin gave him responsibility for overseeing the Soviet atomic bomb project. Beria established a network of scientists, intelligence agents, and managers to collect information about Western nuclear research, with only one goal: to accelerate the Soviet atomic program. He made sure that captured German nuclear scientists were brought into the project after the war. His ruthless organizational style was one of the reasons that ensured that the Soviet Union exploded its first atomic bomb in 1949, ending the American monopoly on nuclear weapons and shocking the world. After the war, Beria remained one of Stalin's most trusted and feared collaborators. He continued to control the security service, and he managed both intelligence gathering abroad and repression at home. He also took a keen interest in the Soviet Union's industrial reconstruction, especially in sectors related to defense and nuclear development. In meetings with Stalin, he appeared confident and efficient, always careful to flatter the leader while presenting himself as indispensable for Stalin and the Soviet Union. In private, Beria's reputation was much darker. Numerous accounts describe him as a sexual predator who abused his position to exploit young and beautiful women. Allegedly, he identified women he wanted from the back of his limousine during his trips through Moscow. Women he picked were taken to his place outside Moscow, where wine and a feast awaited them. After dining, Beria would take the women into his soundproofed office and rape them there. If they refused to go with him, he threatened them with prison and Gulag. He also satisfied his sexual desires by abusing his position, forcing the wives and daughters of prisoners in the gulags to sleep with him if they wanted to secure the release of their loved ones. It did not end only with sexual violence. Guards stationed outside his Moscow residence reported that women were brought to him and that some never returned. Many decades later, remains of skeletons were found on the premises of Beria's former villa, leading some to label him as a serial killer. Although the full extent of these crimes remains difficult to document, testimonies after his death painted a picture of a man who combined political ruthlessness with personal immorality. Despite his enormous power, Beria understood that Stalin's favor could vanish at any moment. He worked tirelessly to maintain his standing, eliminating rivals and gathering information that could be used against them. He also tried to cultivate a public image as a capable administrator who contributed to Soviet strength and stability. His control over the NKVD gave him enormous leverage over the lives of both ordinary Soviet citizens and senior officials of the communist regime. When Stalin died on the 5th of March 1953, Beria moved quickly to seize the initiative. At Stalin's funeral, he stood prominently among the Soviet leaders, signaling his position in the Soviet Union. Within days, he drafted a general amnesty that released over 1 million prisoners from labor camps and jails. While this act seemed humanitarian, it also served to weaken the power of the regional security bosses and to create goodwill among the population. Beria also began to roll back some of the harshest policies of the Stalin era, promising reforms in nationalities policy and economic management. For a few months, Beria appeared to be the most powerful figure in the Soviet leadership, and some observers believed he might succeed in establishing himself as Stalin's true successor. He controlled the security services and had significant influence over the military. However, Beria's rivals, especially Nikita Khrushchev and Georgy Malenkov, feared his ambition and distrusted his promises of reformation of the Soviet Union. They worried that he would use the security apparatus to dominate the government completely. In June 1953, Khrushchev and other members of the leadership plotted to remove him. Marshal Georgy Zhukov, one of the most famous and influential Soviet generals and a hero of the Second World War, with his loyal military units, were persuaded to support the plan. On the 26th of June 1953, during a meeting in the Kremlin, Beria was suddenly confronted by Khrushchev and other members of the plot against Beria. They accused him of treason and of being an agent of foreign powers. As Beria tried to defend himself, Marshal Zhukov entered the room with armed officers, and Beria was arrested on the spot. He was taken to a secure prison, where he was kept under constant guard. Over the next several months, a secret investigation collected real and also fabricated evidence against him. The charges included abuse of power, espionage, and numerous personal crimes. Beria's long record of repression and cruelty, once considered a demonstration of loyalty to Stalin, was now used to justify his removal. In December 1953, he was tried in a special session of the Supreme Court of the Soviet Union, chaired by Marshal Ivan Konev. Defense was not permitted. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to death. Allegedly, he pleaded the court on his knees before collapsing to the floor. The 54-year-old Lavrentiy Beria was executed on the 23rd of December, 1953, with a bullet to the forehead fired by General Pavel Baditsky.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.